My mother-in-law threw my daughter's science fair trophy in the trash because her son didn't place. She called it teaching humility. I called it the last mistake she would ever make in my house because it turns out it actually was my house, and she was about to find that out in the most permanent way possible. Make sure you're subscribed because you're going to want to see how this ends. And while you're at it, drop a comment where in the world are you watching from today. We love knowing who's out there. The Saturday morning my life changed started the way most of my Saturdays did. Chaos, coffee, and my daughter Maisie talking a mile a minute about something I was only half awake enough to process. She was 9 years old and had the energy of a small weather system. She had been working on her science fair project for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of papier-mâché, food coloring, baking soda measurements, and library books spread across the kitchen table like a paper blizzard. The project was a model of a volcanic ecosystem, not just the eruption, but the entire recovery cycle. New plants, displaced animals, soil regeneration. Her teacher had called it the most ambitious entry she had seen from a third grader in her 12 years of teaching. I was a paralegal at a mid-size firm downtown, and I had taken the morning off to drive Maisie to the exhibition at her school. Her father, my ex-husband Derek, had promised to meet us there. He didn't. That was a pattern I had stopped being surprised by 2 years ago, when he moved to Phoenix and started a new chapter that didn't include school pickups or science fair Saturdays. What I didn't expect was for my mother-in-law Derek's mother, Rhonda, to be the one waiting at my front door when we got back. I should explain the situation, because context matters here. After the divorce, I had moved back into the house I had bought before Derek and I ever got together. It was mine, my name, my mortgage, my weekend of stressful paperwork at 26 when I had scraped together every dollar I had saved since my first job at 17. Derek had never been on the deed. He had, however, convinced me 3 years into our marriage that it made sense for his mother to move into the finished basement apartment when she lost her job and her own lease in the same brutal month. Just temporarily, he said, just until she gets back on her feet. That was 4 years ago. Derek had since moved to Phoenix. Rhonda had not moved anywhere. We had a lease agreement I had insisted on that much, $400 a month, which was so far below market rate it was practically charity, covering a fully furnished space with its own entrance, bathroom, and kitchenette. I had done it because I believed family helped family. I had done it because Maisie loved her grandmother, and I wanted Maisie to have that relationship even after the divorce cracked everything else apart. I had swallowed a lot to preserve that peace. The comments about how I worked too many hours, the suggestions, always framed as concern, that Maisie was picking up independence too young, and that it wasn't natural for a little girl to be so self-sufficient. The comparison, constant and grinding, between Maisie and Rhonda's other grandchild, her daughter Patrice's son Cooper. Cooper was 12, 3 years older than Maisie, and in Rhonda's telling, he was exceptional in every possible way. Cooper got straight A's. Cooper played travel baseball. Cooper was, according to Rhonda, the standard against which all other grandchildren should measure themselves, and find themselves lacking. Maisie had stopped asking why Grandma Rhonda always talked about Cooper. She had stopped asking a lot of things about her grandmother. Children are perceptive in ways adults underestimate. The science fair results had been posted to the school app while we were still in the auditorium. Maisie had placed first in her grade. First place meant a small trophy, a gold-painted resin thing that was maybe 8 inches tall, and cost the school district probably $4 to produce. To Maisie, it was the Stanley Cup and the Olympic gold medal compressed into one shiny object. She held it against her chest the entire drive home and made me promise 3 times that we would find the perfect spot for it on her bookshelf. When I pulled into the driveway, Rhonda was already in the main house. She had a key for emergencies. I had never defined what counted as an emergency, and I realize now that had been a mistake. She was in the kitchen. She had made herself coffee. She turned when we came through the door, and her eyes went straight to the trophy in Maisie's hands. "Well," she said, "look at that. I got first place, Grandma," Maisie said, holding it up. She was beaming. It was the kind of beam that a child produces when they have worked genuinely hard for something, and the world has recognized it. It is one of the most beautiful things a parent ever gets to witness. Rhonda's smile was the other kind, the one that doesn't reach the eyes. I had seen it enough times to know the difference. First place in the whole 3rd grade, I said, setting my bag down and moving toward the coffee maker. Her teacher was really impressed. Hooper won his district chess tournament last month, Rhonda said. She said it the way you'd present a counterargument. That's great, I said, keeping my voice even. Maisie, go put your stuff away, okay? Maisie headed for the stairs. I heard her footsteps going up, and then I heard them stop. Then I heard her come back down, slower this time, and I turned around. She was standing in the doorway between the hallway and the kitchen. Her face had done something. The beam was gone. In its place was a careful, very still expression that no 9-year-old should know how to make. Mom, she said, my trophy isn't on the counter. I looked at the counter. She was right. She had set it there when we walked in while she unzipped her backpack. Did you move it? I asked Rhonda. Rhonda set her coffee mug down. She looked at me with that practiced steadiness she used when she was certain she was right about something. I put it in the recycling bin, she said. Outside. The kitchen went very quiet. I'm sorry, I said. She doesn't need to be walking around with that thing like it's some great achievement, Rhonda said. Her voice was completely level, as if she were explaining something obvious to someone slow. It's a school project. She's 9. You're raising her to think she's better than other children. It's not healthy. It teaches arrogance. I put it in the bin because she needs to learn that winning isn't everything, and that humility is a virtue. I looked at my daughter. Maisie's eyes had filled. She was not crying yet. She was holding it back with everything she had, the way children do when they are trying very hard to be brave and are failing at the edges. Maisie, I said, keeping my voice very calm, go get your trophy from the bin outside, baby. She should leave it, Rhonda said. Maisie, go ahead. Maisie went. I waited until I heard the back door open. Then I turned fully toward Rhonda. You went into my daughter's belongings, I said, and you threw them away to teach her a lesson. I went into your kitchen, Rhonda said, where things get thrown away all the time. Her trophy. A plastic trinket that you are turning into a bigger deal than it needs to be. I looked at this woman. I had known her for 8 years. I had driven her to doctor's appointments when Derek was traveling. I had helped her move her furniture down into the basement apartment. I had brought her soup when she had bronchitis the previous winter, climbing down the exterior stairs in the cold with a container of chicken noodle because she was too proud to ask and too sick to cook. I had told myself each time that this was what good people did, that patience was a form of love, and that you absorb these small cruelties from difficult people, because the alternative is a kind of hardness you don't want to become. My daughter came back through the door holding her trophy. There was a smear of coffee grounds on the base where it had rested against something in the bin. Maisie was wiping it on her shirt, trying to clean it, her jaw tight, her eyes bright. That image was the thing that moved something in me from one place to another permanently. Thank you for coming by, I said to Rhonda. You need to go back downstairs now. Rhonda looked surprised. That was the first surprising thing. She had not expected to be dismissed. I haven't finished my coffee. You can take it with you. She studied me for a moment. Then she picked up her mug, gave Maisie one last look that I can only describe as disapproving, and walked out the back door toward the basement entrance. I waited until I heard the exterior door close below. Then I went to Maisie and held her for a long time. She did cry, finally, against my shoulder. Not the loud crying of a younger child, but something quieter and more complicated. The kind of crying that comes when you understand for the first time that someone who is supposed to love you has chosen not to. You worked so hard, I told her. 6 weeks, every night. You earned that trophy. It belongs to you, and no one has the right to decide it isn't worth keeping. Do you hear me? She nodded into my shoulder. We are going to find it the best spot on your shelf, I said, and it is going to stay there for as long as you want it. I cleaned the base of the trophy with a damp cloth. We put it on the top shelf, center position. Maisie stood back and looked at it for a moment. Then she went to do her homework, because she was 9 and the world was already turning again. I went to my home office and closed the door softly. I was not going to let this go. I want to be clear about something, because people sometimes hear a story like this and think the anger is about a trophy. It was never about the trophy. It was about 8 years of small diminishments that I had permitted because I thought tolerating them was the price of keeping peace in a family that was already fractured. It was about my daughter coming down the stairs with that very still, very careful face. It was about Rhonda having made a calculation that her judgment about what my child deserved to feel proud of superseded my own. It was about the absolute certainty in her voice when she described throwing a 9-year-old's achievement in the trash as a virtue. I had a lease agreement in my filing cabinet. I opened it. The language was standard. Tenant agrees to respect the rights and property of other occupants of the dwelling. Tenant agrees not to interfere with the quiet enjoyment of the primary residence. There was also a conduct clause I had added at the advice of a colleague when we signed it 2 years ago. Tenant agrees not to engage in behavior that is harmful, harassing, or detrimental to the well-being of minors residing in the primary residence. I had thought that clause was overkill when I added it. I had thought it would never matter. I photographed every page of the lease. I photographed the trophy, the coffee grounds stains still faintly visible on the base. I wrote down exactly what Rhonda had said, word for word. While it was still precise in my memory, I time-stamped the document and emailed it to myself. Then I called my colleague Jess, who was a family attorney and one of the sharpest people I knew. I told her everything. Document it all, Jess said. Every incident, every comment, every time she's come into the main house uninvited. Write it down tonight while it's fresh. I want her out, I said. The words felt strange, factual. I want to start the process. There was a pause. Okay, Jess said. I'll help you. But go in calm, don't telegraph it. Go in calm and then let the paperwork do the talking. I spent that evening making a list. It was longer than I expected. Longer than I had let myself acknowledge while I was in the middle of living through it. I noted the times Rhonda had let herself into the main house without asking. I noted the comments about Maisie's independence, her mannerisms, her diet, her bedtime, her relationship with Derek, the insinuations that my parenting was the problem, that my career was the problem, that the divorce was my fault for working too much and not being soft enough. I noted the Cooper comparisons. I counted them. There were 11 documented in the previous year alone. I noted that Maisie had stopped wanting to go downstairs to visit her grandmother. I had assumed it was a phase. I understood now that it was self-protection. The next morning was Sunday. I heard Rhonda's exterior door open around 9. I was ready. I came outside and met her on the small patio between the house and the basement entrance. I'd like to talk, I said. She looked wary. Good. What you did yesterday was not discipline, I said. You are not Maisie's parent. You are not a co-parent. You are a tenant in my home, and you do not have the authority to handle, discard, or make decisions about my daughter's belongings for any reason. Rhonda folded her arms. I was teaching her something important. You were punishing her for succeeding, I said. And I think somewhere you know that, which is why you did it while I wasn't in the room. Something shifted in her face. Anger. Fast and hot. You've always been this way. You've always made everything about yourself and your precious daughter. Derek warned me that you were difficult. Derek also moved to Phoenix, I said. I'm the one who let you stay. That landed. I saw it land. I want to inform you, I said, that I am initiating the notice to vacate process. You will receive a formal 30-day notice from my attorney within the week. The conduct clause in your lease was violated yesterday. I have documented it. She stared at me. The color left her face and then came back too dark. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. I have nowhere to go. I am 63 years old. You cannot put me out of my home. It's my home, I said. Not unkindly, just accurately. And I'm giving you 30 days, which is more than the lease requires for a conduct violation. She called Derek within the hour. I know because Derek called me 20 minutes later, and his voice had the particular texture it got when he was agitated and trying to sound calm. My mother just called me in tears, he said. What's going on? I told him exactly what happened. I was precise. I used the same words Rhonda had used, teaching humility. I described Maisie's face on the stairs. Derek was quiet for a moment. She's old-fashioned, he said. You know how she is. She probably thought she was helping. Old-fashioned. He was offering me the same explanation he had offered for 8 years of similar incidents. She's old-fashioned. That's just how she grew up. She means well. She went into my daughter's belongings, I said, and discarded them to make a point. While I was standing in the other room, it's a trophy, Callie. Derek, I said, I'm not calling to ask your opinion on whether to evict her. I'm informing you as Maisie's co-parent so you're aware of the situation. The legal process is already in motion. If you want to help your mother find housing, that would be a good use of your energy. He hung up. He called back 40 minutes later with a different approach, calmer, more strategic. He was offering to mediate, to fly back, to talk it through. To make Monica, he kept saying Monica, which was Rhonda's middle name, which he used when he was being formal to make her understand that she had crossed a line and to facilitate an apology. "She'll apologize," Derek said. "I know she will. She knows she went too far. An apology." I thought about Maisie wiping coffee grounds off the base of her trophy with the hem of her shirt. I thought about that careful, still face. "I'll let her apologize to Maisie if she wants to," I said. "That's between them. The eviction stands." What came next was a campaign. I hadn't anticipated the scale of it, and I think that's because I had underestimated how much Rhonda had invested in the story of herself as a wronged matriarch. It started with texts. Not to me, she had too much dignity for that, but to every mutual contact she could locate. My ex-sister-in-law, Derek's younger sister Tamra, messaged me 3 days later with a tone that suggested she was very sorry to be involved. Rhonda had been telling people I was retaliating against her because I had never forgiven Derek for leaving, that I was a vindictive ex-wife using the trophy incident as an excuse to hurt the one family member who had stayed present for Maisie. Stayed present. I read that twice. Then came the neighbor. Rhonda had spoken to Patricia next door, who was 70 years old and gentle and had no real context for any of this. Patricia knocked on my door on a Tuesday evening with a plate of cookies and the worried face of someone who had been given an incomplete picture and wanted to help. "Rhonda seems so upset," Patricia said carefully. "She said you're asking her to leave. Is everything okay?" I thanked Patricia for the cookies. I told her that some things were happening in the family, and I appreciated her concern. I did not tell her the details because it was not her business, and because I refused to conduct this conflict on Rhonda's chosen terrain, which was the court of neighborhood opinion. What I did do was call Jess. "She's talking," I said. "Let her," Jess said. "She's generating noise. You're generating paperwork. Paperwork wins." The 30-day notice was served by a professional process server on a Wednesday afternoon. I watched from the upstairs window as the server knocked on the basement exterior door, and Rhonda answered, and then stood very still, reading the document. She looked up once toward the main house. I stepped back from the window. That evening, she left me a voicemail. Her voice was different than I had ever heard it, stripped of the usual authority, something rawer underneath. "Callie, I need to talk to you. I need you to understand that I did not mean to hurt Maisie. I have opinions about how children should be raised, and I know that sometimes my opinions come out too strong. I don't have anywhere to go. I'm 63, and my savings are, I'm asking you to reconsider. I'm asking you as the mother of my grandchild. Please call me back." I listened to it 3 times. Then I called Jess and played it for her. "Remorse adjacent," Jess said. Notice she didn't say she was wrong. She said her opinions came out too strong. I noticed that too. I did not call back. I sent a text. "I've received your message. The legal timeline is unchanged. If you need a referral for senior housing resources in the area, I am willing to provide that." Derek called again. This time he was not calm. This time he said things that he cannot unsay, and that I will not repeat here because they are not the point. The point is that by the end of that call, I understood something I had been avoiding for 2 years. Derek had never left this situation. He had moved his body to Phoenix, but he had never stopped managing his mother's comfort at my expense. He had done it during our marriage, and he was doing it now. His absence had just made it easier for me to ignore. I hung up and sat in the quiet of my office for a long time. The day I went to inspect the basement apartment, 24 hours notice given, as required, I brought Jess. Not because I expected trouble, but because I wanted a witness, and because Jess had seen the lease and knew every relevant clause, and I felt steadier when she was in the room. Rhonda was partially packed. There were boxes against one wall and a pile of items she apparently hadn't decided about yet in the center of the room. She stood near the kitchenette when we came in. She was wearing her coat already, like she was about to leave, though she had nowhere to go that afternoon. She looked older. I noticed that. I noticed it, and I felt the complicated thing you feel when someone you have cared for, genuinely, through meals and appointments and bronchitis and 4 years of proximity, has made it impossible to keep caring for them the way you did. "I want you to know," she said, not looking at Jess, looking at me, "that I love Maisie. Whatever you think of me, I love her. I know you do, I said. It was true. I believed it. I also believed that love delivered in the manner she delivered it was not harmless, and that believing both of those things simultaneously was one of the most exhausting features of being an adult. Then why are you doing this? She asked. Because she came down those stairs, I said, and her face had changed, and I am not willing to keep choosing peace over her. Rhonda looked at the window. She didn't respond. The inspection was quick. There was minor wall damage near the closet that would come from the security deposit. Everything else was within normal wear. We left. Derek did fly in, ultimately, 3 days before the vacate date. He did not stay at my house. He rented a hotel room downtown and spent 2 days helping Rhonda pack and locate a short-term furnished apartment on the other side of the city, closer to Patrice's neighborhood, which had apparently always been an option that no one had prioritized while my basement was available. He knocked on my front door on the last morning. I opened it. He looked like a man who had been awake for several days, thinking about things he would rather not have thought about. He looked, honestly, like an older version of the boy I had married, worn down to something more basic. "She's out," he said. "The place is empty. I cleaned it myself." "Thank you," I said. He put his hands in his pockets. "Callie, He stopped, started again. "I know I've been saying the wrong things. I know I've been on the wrong side of this for a long time. Not just this, a lot of things." He said it like a man making a confession he wasn't sure he deserved absolution for. Which was accurate. "I know," I said. "Can I see Maisie?" he asked. I called her down. She came and stood beside me in the doorway, and her face when she saw her father was young and complicated the love of a child for a parent who has been inconsistent, which is a specific and painful kind of love. He hugged her carefully, like he was aware of how much he had to make up for, and wasn't sure where to start. I watched them on the porch and felt something settle, not resolution exactly, but something closer to ground. 3 weeks after Rhonda moved out, Maisie asked me if we could put some plants in the basement apartment. "Are we going to rent it to someone?" she asked. "Maybe eventually," I said. "Why?" "Because plants would make it nice," she said, "for whoever comes next." She was 9 years old and she was already thinking about what comes next. I bought her 3 plants from the nursery that weekend and let her choose where they went. She put one on the kitchenette windowsill, where the afternoon light was best. The criminal component resolved quietly. Because Rhonda's action had been against property rather than person, there was no assault charge. But Jess had advised me to file a formal harassment complaint related to the neighbor contact and the spreading of false information, and the process server had documented the service. None of it went to court. The eviction was uncontested in the end, because Rhonda's attorney, a friend of Derek's, not a professional, looked at the lease clause and the documented conduct violation and told her she had no standing. I don't know if that felt like victory. I know it felt like the right outcome. There's a difference. What I know is that Maisie's trophy is still on the top shelf, center position. She doesn't mention it every day anymore, the way she did in the first weeks. Now she's moved on to the next project, a presentation on coral reef restoration that she has been working on since October, that she will present in spring, that she will throw herself into with the same wholehearted intensity she brings to everything. Because that is who she is. That is who she has always been. And she did not learn to dim it for the comfort of people who found her brightness inconvenient. I made sure of that. Rhonda sends a card on Maisie's birthday. The first one came 2 months after she moved out. It had a check inside for $20 and a line that said, "I'm proud of you, even when I don't show it right." Maisie read it, folded it carefully, and put it in her desk drawer. She didn't ask me what to think about it. She is 9 and she has better instincts than most adults I know. I have spoken to Derek twice since then, both times about school scheduling and medical insurance. We are cordial. We are co-parents. That is the appropriate container for what we are to each other now, and I think we both understand that. I kept the basement empty for 2 months. I needed to let it be mine again before I let it belong to someone else. In January, I rented it to a graduate student named Yolanda, who is quiet and considerate, and sends me a Venmo payment on the 1st of every month with a sunflower emoji. She leaves thank you notes sometimes. Small ones, on the doorstep of the exterior entrance. I don't know what I did to deserve her, but I am grateful. Some people ask, when they hear a story like this, Whether it was worth it, whether the peace you lose is worth the peace you gain, whether you regret it. I don't have a clean answer for that. I have the answer that Maisie gave me, the morning after Rhonda moved out. When I told her that we would have the house to ourselves now, just the two of us, the way it had been before, she looked up from her cereal and said, "Good." It felt crowded, 9 years old. Better instincts than most adults I know. I drew a line. When it was crossed, I didn't raise my voice or lose my composure or try to win the argument. I just enforced the boundary I had every legal and moral right to enforce. I protected my daughter's right to come down the stairs beaming, trophy in hand, without having to make her face go still and careful and small. If you're in a situation where someone is using access to your home, your generosity, your patience, as a license to diminish someone you love, I want you to hear this. Tolerance is not the same as acceptance. You are allowed to revisit arrangements that were made in good faith and violated the same way. You do not have to keep absorbing the cost of someone else's bitterness to prove that you are a kind person. The kindest thing I ever did was show my daughter that her accomplishments were worth defending, that she was worth defending. Everything else was just paperwork.